Welcome to episode 50 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tachek.
Nearly every part of our lives has been touched, changed, maybe even disrupted by technology in recent years. That's everything from how we make phone calls to whether we even bother making phone calls, how we exercise, how we bank, how we work, and how we spend our downtime. With tech seeping into every corner of our lives, it's no surprise that healthcare is going through a tech transformation as well. Our medical records used to be bound in physical folders, stuffed with paper and x-rays and other physical media. So much of that has gone digital now. That's super convenient for you, your doctor, and unfortunately bad guys. Hackers have an eye on innovations in healthcare, looking for new opportunities to exploit the new systems. Today, we're looking at the way tech has changed medicine, including the threats the healthcare industry faces and what can be done to protect patient safety. Items on the checklist. Why did medicine go digital? Security concerns for medical devices, device security problems in hospitals, hospitals held ransom, and finally the future of digital security in the medical field. So let's begin at the beginning. Why did doctors and hospitals go digital in the first place?
Bottom line, digital is faster and more convenient. No more worrying about storing and retrieving paper files. A lot of the time, you don't even need a paper prescription anymore. Orders can just be sent over to the pharmacy electronically. Of course, we want to try to keep that information safe. You may know HIPAA laws as laws to protect patient privacy. HIPAA also restricts how doctors can share your protected health information, or PHI. But that's not all HIPAA does. Back in 1996, HIPAA also established a framework for electronic communications in the medical field and began encouraging the changeover to electronic health records, or EHRs. HIPAA also contained a security rule for handling this sensitive data. The government laid out 3 ways PHIs needed protection: technically, physically, and on the administrative level. Technical security measures included mandatory encryption, in-depth authentication procedures, and a whole lot more. In 2009, the U.S. Congress also passed HITECH, the Health Information Technology for Economics and Clinical Health Act. HITECH came in response to threats and insecurity around health data. Not only did HITECH clarify patient data responsibility with medical organizations, it also set up a mandatory notification period for data breaches. Additionally, HITECH set the stage for harsher penalties and enforcement in case of violations. So there are risks, but again, digital is faster and more convenient. It comes with worries of its own, though. When HIPAA and HITECH were introduced, a lot of people still had privacy concerns. Those concerns are why there's no centralized medical record system in the U.S. But there still is centralization. Major hospitals, health networks, and insurers collect information on millions of patients. We have electronic health records for speed and convenience. Unfortunately, that can make things fast and easy for bad guys as well. Besides your doctor's office, think of all the places that could handle your health records. Payment processors, labs, hospital partners. Your records could pass through all of them, especially if you have a major treatment. That also makes it hard to pinpoint the source of a breach should one occur.
Okay, I understand not wanting all of your health information, not wanting everybody's health information in one place, because that means everybody's health information is in one place. I mean, that's personal information that you wouldn't necessarily want anybody else to have access to. At the same time, and this is just a theoretical because we don't have one of these databases like we're talking about. At the same time, though, if you've got, this doctor has this system and this hospital has this system, and then this other doctor that I'm seeing that I didn't tell my other 2 doctors about also have this other system. I mean, everything from, going pharmacy shopping or drug shopping for all intents and purposes, to just one doctor not even knowing I'm seeing another doctor, both for legitimate concerns. I guess what I'm wondering, just like personally for you guys, would you rather see a centralized database where we know like all of my health information is being synthesized into one file? Or are you more comfortable with, 5 different doctors having 5 different electronic files that seem like it could almost be as cumbersome as the paper files we started with?
Personally, I honestly think I'd probably prefer one database. And I think the only way it could really work is if it was government run. And that would mean, healthcare overhaul, essentially. I think that's the only way it could work.
Right.
Or the only way that it would make sense to bother. But I could see... Mm-hmm. I think the positives would outweigh the negatives in that regard.
Yeah, you're always going to scare the crud out of people, though, if you're like, hey, don't worry, the government just wants all the information about your health.
Exactly.
I mean, which I understand. I mean, honestly, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, for convenience and for making sure, because I've talked before, I had a relative who was going to 2 different doctors. The 2 different doctors weren't communicating, and he was in his 70s. And so he wasn't really necessarily the best person to communicate what each doctor was doing. It actually ended up with a little bit of a health scare for him because he had 2 doctors not working at cross purposes, just each was not aware what the other was doing.
Now, is that because he checked that box that said, do not share my information with other doctors?
Sadly, he's not around to ask anymore, so I can't answer that question. I don't know. I see pluses and minuses on both sides. But you know what? We're not going to solve that problem today. Let's work on some other ones. Like we're talking about this personal health information. Why would anybody besides me even want that information? Me or my doctor anyway?
Well, medical fraud might be one reason, but it's not the big reason. The reason EHRs trade for such high prices on the dark web is because they contain vital personal information that almost never changes. In the United States, EHRs hold information like your social security number and your billing address. In other words, they're the perfect target for identity thieves or hackers looking to make a quick buck. In one experiment a few years back, researchers created a fake trove of about 1,000 health records and put them up on the dark web. Those records quickly crisscrossed the globe, ending up in 22 countries. And that shows why strong security is needed for digital health information. But while it's needed, we don't always get it. Security is still lax in many major corporations and hospitals. Big-name insurers and large hospitals have suffered breaches that eventually exposed millions of consumer health records. In 2015, health insurance giant Anthem was forced to disclose the theft of nearly 80 million medical records by a group of hackers, and none of those records were encrypted. In this case, encryption wasn't required, so Anthem didn't use it. As a result, tens of millions of its customers may still be at risk. Meanwhile, the same group of hackers may have stolen more than 1 million records from another insurer later that same year. As we mentioned, HITECH has provisions for reporting security breaches and notifying affected people as soon as possible. But that might just be closing the barn door after the horses are out. Your medical history isn't something you can just swap out like a new credit card number. Once these records are out there, they're out there for good, which, again, proves the need for strong security.
Well, I'm freaked out, guys. But I'm not sure I'm as freaked out as I could be. Talk to me about security concerns for medical devices.
Not unlike our Internet of Things episode, checklist number 42, it's easy to forget how connected some of these devices in our bodies are. From pacemakers that monitor a patient's heart rate and vitals, to insulin pumps that deliver medicine to people with diabetes, there's plenty to hack in the human body. While it sounds like science fiction, these things could actually happen. The fact is there are potentially millions of medical devices out there with glaring security holes. In fairness, these devices are designed and used by certain kinds of scientists and doctors, not security experts. Additionally, there may be a bit of the "it can't happen to me" attitude. Being first to market with a new or innovative device typically takes priority, with security as an afterthought. So how do these security lapses translate into threats? Let's go back to the insulin pump. One model put out by Johnson & Johnson uses a small wireless remote to regulate the pump. Johnson & Johnson had to tell users about a vulnerability that could let rogue signals operate the device. They downplayed the problem, and it's true that it would take a lot of work, expertise, and special equipment to make it happen. But it could happen, potentially leading to an insulin overdose and the death of the user. What made this problem bigger was the fact that hackers wouldn't need the serial number of the particular device. In other words, it would work with any of the insulin pumps in question. Since none of the devices use encryption, it's not hard for some hackers to communicate with and misuse the equipment. People with pacemakers face similar problems. As recently as January 2017, the FDA issued warnings for pacemakers using Wi-Fi hardware from a particular company. With the right equipment and know-how, a hacker could tell the pacemaker to deliver a potentially fatal shock, or to mess with someone's heartbeat.
Hey, you know who has lots of medical devices? Hospitals. That seems like a potential hacker heaven.
Right? From computers wheeled around to gather billing information to tons of life-saving digital equipment, computers are everywhere in hospitals. Every hospital bed in the U.S. might have up to 15 devices connected. The problems we just hit around individual medical devices can be magnified by many times in hospitals. Patients with pacemakers and people hooked up to insulin machines are just as vulnerable to security threats in hospitals as they are elsewhere, though it might be harder for hackers to get close enough to execute an attack. But hospitals are a minefield of lax security. Back in 2012, a security researcher named Scott Irvin was given permission to investigate all of a hospital's digital systems. His mission: find security holes and figure out how to reduce risk. What he found was not good. Nearly every device in the hospital was hackable to some degree. Some flaws he found included the ability to hack defibrillators and the ability to tell drug pumps to pump the wrong doses to a patient. Even patients' x-rays were accessible to someone who knew where to look. Irvin found many devices that didn't require authentication to use at all, or that relied on easy-to-guess default passwords like password. Seriously. While hackers might not be able to access a hospital's individual medical devices online, there are still points of massive vulnerability. Most of the hardware doesn't connect directly to the internet, but it does connect to the hospital's intranet, which is connected to the internet somewhere along the line. This network connectivity is necessary not just to share test results or data from one department to another, but for creating a patient's health record. That's right, we're talking about the same EHRs that hackers want to steal. Recording this information is necessary, but it also creates a pile of information that bad guys want to steal. That info, plus the lax security around medical devices, makes hospitals a potential goldmine for black hats.
Now, I will say, had we been doing this show a couple of years ago, it might have been more surprising to people. The idea of hospitals and hacking is a bit less surprising today, though, thanks to the ransomware attacks seen over the past couple of years.
Yeah, with so much of hospital operations ultimately accessible through the internet, hospitals have a pretty big bullseye on them. They're major targets for malware, holding hospital systems and their data hostage. This showed up big time in 2016, when ransomware incidents spiked across the globe. In February of 2016, a hospital in California had its systems locked down by ransomware attackers, demanding a lot of money. Eventually, they got a relatively small amount, settling for a $17,000 ransom. The hospital was able to recover its systems, but it doesn't always work out that way. Later that same year, a hospital in Kansas was also hit with ransomware. They paid the ransom, we don't know how much, only to be hit with another demand for more ransom. With no idea how long this would go on and how much it would cost, the hospital declined to pay the second ransom and had to recover its systems from scratch. While those cases might have been an alarm, officials just kept hitting snooze, at least until a few months ago. In early 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack spread like wildfire around the globe, making headlines, especially when it disrupted the UK's National Health Service. We covered some of the effects of the WannaCry attack on episode 38 of the checklist, but we didn't talk a lot about the NHS attack specifically. It was serious. WannaCry affected vital equipment, screwing up schedules and preventing patients from undergoing necessary tests. Medical staffers were locked out of critical files, and WannaCry even hit computers attached to critical equipment like MRI machines. While a lot of this is state-of-the-art medical equipment, it's often running outdated software. The MRI machines, for example, still use Windows XP, a prime candidate for the Eternal Blue exploit that WannaCry used. These aren't just standalone computers either. They're systems embedded into the MRI hardware itself. That means they're not just difficult to update to newer operating systems, they're extraordinarily difficult to replace outright. The cost would be astronomical. Plus, smaller medical facilities buy older or used equipment, which could come bundled with this old and out-of-date software. The best practice might be to keep these devices as isolated on the network as possible. Until that happens, situations like the WannaCry attack could happen again.
Well, rather than ending the show in terror, let's light a candle for people. What can people do to reduce health hacking threats?
Lots of things. For starters, be aware. You can't protect against a threat you don't know about or which you've dismissed as not a problem. Hopefully the WannaCry attack was a wake-up call to the medical world that these issues are real and they aren't going away. Next, keep learning. With so many different attack vectors out there, it's important to keep telling the medical industry about the risks they face. Work is being done in that field. 2017 saw the first CyberMed Summit, an attempt to educate healthcare professionals on the digital threats that they face. CyberMed used a simulated hack against a hospital to demonstrate the potential for disruption. Now, while it's important for manufacturers to toughen device security, hospital workers also need to know how to cope with the problems they may face. White hat hackers will also play a crucial role. They can uncover serious vulnerabilities before bad guys do, giving the medical industry time to develop solutions. The public has a part to play too. Be aware of who's doing a good job at protecting medical security and who's not, and let them know you're watching. Consumer pressure can accomplish a lot, especially over the long term.
I'd say too, don't be afraid to ask questions, right? I mean, doctors and hospitals can be intimidating, but as we've discussed, it's not just your personal information that's on the line, it's your health. And also, it's your personal information. I don't know, your doctor may not even know the answer to your question, but the question you ask may get somebody that you're dealing with, thinking about it a bit more and hopefully being a bit more careful, which makes you kind of a hero, I think, or at least might give you peace of mind. Hey, we mentioned a couple of past episodes earlier in the show. If you want to find those or notes for those shows or notes for this show, the place to do it is securemac.com/checklist. That is securemac.com/checklist for all your show note needs. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.